Namaste, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Today we're going to learn a little bit more about Varna, Kula, and Jati. These are the issues presently bothering many of us, especially Hindus. There is a lot of confusion about these topics. So today we're going to explore a little bit about these topics so that when you leave this presentation, you have some new information on these topics. So with this, I'm starting my presentation. Om Nasti Satyat Paro Dharmaha Satyena Dharyate Prudivi Satyena Tapate Ravihi Satyena Vati Vayischa Sarvam Satye Pratishtitam Vagardha Viva Sampruptau Vagardha Pratipattaye Jagatah Pitarau Vande Parvati Parameshwarau Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. The disclaimer. This is a vast topic that we're covering today, which was built over thousands of years. I happen to find a few pieces of the puzzle, which I'm trying to present here to give a basic view about these concepts. There's a lot more info on this topic, which is yet to see the light. Varna Kula have many dimensions, such as spiritual, economical, political, etc. This present presentation is aimed at the spiritual aspects of these Varna Kula systems. And this mainly focuses on South Indian society, and information pertaining to North Indian society is also presented as available. Given the vastness of this topic, this presentation is like doing a marathon race in a 4x4 room. Therefore, I will present only a few aspects which are relevant. The agenda of the topic is this. We will understand about the European society and caste and the European view of Hindu society. We'll briefly understand what is Dharma and Varna, and we'll move on to Nigama Agama traditions, then how these traditions are divided on the concept called Adhikari Bheda. Then we'll understand a little bit more about the divisions in the Saiva Shakta traditions, Sampradaya. Then we'll learn a little bit about Kulam and Jati emic perspective, the differences in the worldviews from the Western and Dharmic societies, and finally we'll conclude this with the conclusion. So European society and caste. What did caste mean? Caste means materialistic hierarchical social segregation. In the European context, caste could refer to occupational guilds, wealth, power, race, and such hierarchical materialistic divisions. This racial caste was very much part of Christian society. Throughout the 16th and 17th centuries, new Christians who were called Christaos, the Christaos Novos, were treated as outcasts and untouchables because they were believed to be contaminated with bad blood. So hence they were not also allowed to work in important occupations such as military, universities, legal and medical professions, and so on. However, in overseas colonies, these new Christians managed to acquire jobs. So Garcia de Horta, who addressed Hindus as castes in 16th century, was one such new Christian. He was also a physician, wrote a book on Indian plant-based medicine, and this book was published in 1567. This concept of Christaos Novos, it says those who had 7/8 share of white blood were considered as non-whites. So such people had to purchase a purity certificate for social acceptance. And they also, in France, they have a state system which is similar to caste system. And they also had untouchability in France. They were called cagots. This kind of separation continued to be present in Christian societies until early 20th century. For example, the racial prejudice towards the mulattoes of United States. Some others say that in the past, in several European areas, peasants were treated as serfs. They had to take their lord's permission to marry and to change occupation and so on. And these people, they could not run away to other cities because the guilds won't admit them. Due to such treatment and economic oppression, French Revolution and enclosure revolution of Britain and such many other revolutions occurred in Europe. So thus caste in Christian context is very much a racial or materialistic division. Now, when the Europeans came to India, they started addressing many things as caste. So the first one, it started with Garcia de Ota. There are a few books talk about him as the first guy who addressed the divisions in Hindus as castas. So, but subsequently, Europeans used this term caste to identify many aspects. They used caste to identify religion, family, occupation, race, tribe, Kula, Varna, Jati, and so on. Similarly, there are multiple definitions to caste. Till date, there is no precise definition given to caste by the Westerners. As time evolved, Europeans started narrowing down their usage of caste. Initially, they said Varna was caste. Later, they settled down with Jati. Hindu society consisted of two spiritual systems, Varna and Kula. Many Europeans tried to fit them into Aryan and Dravidian framework. Thus, Varna became Aryan and Kula became Dravidian. Importantly, Hindu society had the argument of who is great, who is not great. There were several views on this topic. Each Jati had their own version of hierarchy. British reports said that many castes did not accept the sacerdotal authority of Brahmins, yet it was the British who started labeling them as low, high, untouchable, Panchama castes based on the Varna model. Another important aspect was that all Jatis, including the so-called untouchable Jatis, were proud of their Jati, Kula, and Varna. None felt inferior, but using the relative social method, British imposed a permanent hierarchical caste system on Hindus in 1901. In Hindu point of view, Varna is part of eternal dharma. Kula is attached to achara, sadhana, vritti. In spiritual sphere, Jati denotes either dharma or achara or sadhana. But the colonial reductionistic approach made these natural, spiritual, dharma, sadhana based categories into mere materialistic caste. Importantly, it ignored many spiritual mechanisms that were in practice in the society. For example, achara based social mobility, various types of interjati hypergamic marital relations, Vamachara practices, excommunications, etc. And thus, this concept colonized Hinduism, Westerners colonized Hinduism with caste. This incomplete information based view presently causing confusion and harm in our society. So Amarkosha gives a few Sanskrit definitions to Varna, Kula, and Jati, which are presented here. So it essentially says Varna means Varna, it denotes either color, or a few other texts talk about Varna in the context of light. But as in other definitions, it is talking about Chaturvarna. These are dharma-based divisions when it comes to Varnashrama. Kula, in few texts, define Kula as Sajatiyanam Matrumanameyanam Samuha Kulam. So we will understand a little bit more about Kulam in another slide. So Jati also has two dimensions. One is by birth, and also it is talking about the common quality in different aspects. So that means you're trying to club things based on similar qualities or aspects. So that's what it is. So we'll also know a little bit more about Jati in another slide. So the one of the definition given here is Jatir Jayam cha Samanyam, Jati Samanya Dharmanu, Jayataha iti Jatihi, Jayate Bhinneshwa Bhinna Bhidana Pratyaya Vanayeti. So, and there are, we'll get similar definitions on these lines in many books. So let's move on to the next slide. So the now Varna Dharma, we heard a lot about Varna and Varna Dharma. But all these originated from the concept called Rita. So in Vedic books and a few other texts talk about Ruta, but slowly the word Ruta was replaced with Satya. So in a way, they both were used as synonyms. So Ruta and Satya are the cosmic order, and from which originated the concept called Dharma. Dharma, if we have, there are a lot of wide definitions, and there is a lot of explanation on the concept of Dharma. If we have to put it into simple terms, it is it's we can say natural order. So for Dharma becomes the platform to all Hindu religions on which various sampradayas and various views are developed. So to understand Dharma, Veda is our pramana. So there are several types of Dharma. There are some Sanatana Dharma, Varna Dharma, and so on. But at the same time, at the individual level, they also have Kula Dharma, Jati Dharma, and so on. But importantly, Hindu spirituality expects the individual to fulfill the obligations of his Purushartha, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And once the individual fulfills Dharma, Artha, Kama, then his pursuit begins for Moksha. So based on the Purushartha, with this thing in view, the Varna Dharma was defined in a few Hindu texts, such as Mahabharata and few other texts. So Mahabharata divides Varna Dharma into two groups, and few other texts also talk about Apad Dharma. So for Varna, in order for anybody to be eligible for Varna Dharma, they have to fulfill the obligations of Samanya Dharma. So it is like Samanya Dharma means common to all. All the humans must practice this. So what are those? Non-violence, being careful, sharing, performing Pitrukaryas, hospitality, truthfulness, controlling anger, unenvious, Shaucha or cleanliness, being faithful to his wife. So it is these gunas the individual inherits as part of Varna Dharma. The Samanya Dharma, and once he fulfills these, then he can he can get the eligibility for the Vishesha Dharma, which is Varna Dharma, the occupations, and so on. There are so many diverse definitions to what he could do, what he can't do. So in case of Prakriti Vaiparicya, the individual, there is a lot of leniency given to these Varna Dharmas. So, or in case of war or something, so what he can do, what the Vidhi Nisheda are also given by the Smritis. So here as we observed, Saucha is important to all humans, but this Saucha in the Europeans equated it with either ceremonial purity or purity of blood. But which means all as part of Samanya Dharma, it is not differentiating anybody. It is saying that everybody should practice it. According to Vyasa, the purpose of the Saucha is to let go the love of the physical body. So which is opposite to the race theory. Importantly, those practicing Saucha, sometimes when they get when they are doing the either japa or puja or something like that, they won't even touch their own progeny. So there is this practicing Saucha in a way being projected as a discrimination, but there is another angle to this Saucha, which we will discuss in due course. In Jewish context, ritual purity is associated with death, bodily secretions, diseases, and food offerings, and so on. So various agamas and tantras have their own versions of Saucha in a Hindu spirituality. There are many sects in Bharata who did not believe in Vidhi Nisheda, and a few sects did not accept asaucha or impurity. To them, there is nothing impure, only ajnana which causes impurity, which means there were diverse views on Saucha. But Western reductionism was applied to this concept, and only one model of Saucha was selectively highlighted. So as we learned a little bit about Smritis, the Smritis, some few texts like Shiva Samhita, they talk about the importance of why anybody should practice Varnashrama. It is, you will come across a few slokas like, Samsara Sagaram Tattum Yadichet Yoga Sadaka, Krutva Varnashramam Karma Phalavarjyam Tadacharit. So based on the Varna Dharma and to attain moksha through yoga and such processes, This is one definition or one way to look at the Varnashrama. There are diverse opinions and diverse views on this. So Smritis were created with a lot of Vidhi Nishedas and how to perform, how an individual should live his life. They were all these dharmic rules were codified by the Smritikaras. The Smritis are mainly divided into three branches, three groups, or three chapters: Achara Kanda, Vyavahara Kanda, Prayaschitta Kanda. But along with the Smritis, Hinduism also consists of various agamas and tantras, which has given rise to various methods of sadhanas and acharas. So, at the achara level and prayaschitta level, in the Smritis, in those spheres, many of the sects and jatis, they have their own version of acharas and prayaschitta, which means all the sects were given their own space at these levels. At the Vyavahara Kanda, it may appear to us that Smritis are in force, but from the past 200 years, the relevance of Smriti has gone down severely, because the British have removed the legal base for the Varna Kula Jati, and also they pretty much enacted laws to weaken the Mitaksharas joint family system in the Hindu society. So that also affected the family inheritance and all these. It's a vicious circle they started. So therefore, it is very unfortunate today that many talk about Smritis, but in reality, its relevance is very minimum, and it is also very unfortunate that there is no deep study has taken place on this topic. So, because there are a lot of agamas and tantras that came later on, which developed the concept of sadhana and upasana. And this sadhana and upasana was divided on the basis, on the concept called adhikari bheda. So in our society, we have three main paths of sadhana or spirituality. One is Vedic model, the Puranic model, and the Agamic or Tantric model. So Puranas brought harmony between Vedas and Agamas. And importantly, in a text like Shankara Vijaya, you come across sentences in which they say that those parts of Agama that are ideas of Agama which are in synchronization with Vedas, so Brahmins can practice them, so or Dvijas can practice them. So that way you will see a lot of overlaps between Agamic ideas and Agama paths and Smarta path. So the Adhikari Bheda Siddhanta is based on the individual's, Chitta Shuddhi and several other factors. Bhaskara Raya in 17th century gave a very elaborate explanation on this concept. So this Adhikari Veda divides the sadhana or upasana into two main groups. Those are Vaidikam and Tantrikam. So in 1893, a Britisher called a German who worked for the British, his name was Gustav Oppert. He wrote a book in 1893 titled Original Inhabitants of Bharatavarsha. While he is discussing a few topics about Janapadas, and he cited a shloka from Agama Smriti Sara. And this shloka goes like this: Brahmananam Shivo Devaha, Kshatriyanam tu Madhavaha, Vaishyanam tu Bhavet Brahma, Shudranam Grama Devata. So there is an explanation given for this by Parashara, but it essentially is saying that Shudra should worship Grama Devata. So we also come across similar slokas in a few other texts like Shaivagama Prabhasha Manjari and few Vaishnavite texts like Vishwaksena Samhita, or there are such texts. They also spoke about this kind of layout. They say that Vaidikam Brahmananam to Rajnyam Vaidika Tantrikam, Tantrikam Vaishya Shudranam Sarvesham Tantrikam Tuva, which means that they are saying that Brahmana should practice, Shaivagama Prabhasha Manjari says Brahmana should practice Vaidika way of mantras. The Kshatriya is allowed for Vaidika and Tantrika, but Vaishya Shudra should use Tantrika, which is Tantric mantras. But in Vaishnavite texts, the not only mantra but karma was also divided based on these lines. But importantly, in Shaivism, we will come across the Diksha in two spheres. One is Vaidika Diksha given to Dvijas and Tantrika Diksha was given to the Shudra Varna or the rest of the Manavas, who based on the Adhikari Veda and purity of his Chitta Shuddhi and all that. And it's a similar, the same slide to to explain the Smriti layout here. So in Smritis, various Sampradayas and various Deshakala Paristhiti and based on Adhikara Bheda, there are a lot of provisions are given. So again, these Sampradayas and they're all, they get their rules are Vidhi Nishedas and all such things are based on texts like Vaidika Kalpa and Smritis or Agama Kalpa and so on. So there is these many diverse practices emerged based on several factors through a wide set of traditions over time. They cannot be reduced to either one institution or one tradition or one class of people. Such force fitting has only caused conflict and disharmony in the society. So this is a brief layout of the Shaiva Shakta traditions. As I mentioned briefly, Shaivism was divided on Veda and Agamika paths. Puranas brought harmony between Veda and Agamika paths because it was, so as I said, it was agreed by gurus to practice Agamic ideas that are in agreement with Vedic spirit. So we have a lot of overlaps here. So Agamas are divided in multiple ways. Shaivite Agamas are divided into Atimarga and Mantramarga. Atimarga consists of Panchatika Pashupata sects like Panchatika Pashupatas, Lakulas, Kalamukas, Kapalikas, and from which originated the Mantramarga Shaivam. This Mantramarga Shaivam consists of Shaiva Siddhanta and which is widely practiced in Tamil Nadu area. And also this gave birth to 64 Bhairav Tantras and Kaulachara and such other Trika system and so on. The concept of Adhikari Veda and subsequent Diksha processes mainly involved two types of sadhana known as Antaranga and Bahiranga sadhana. So there is a lot of technical information available on this topic. It is this pattern of goddess worship we get to see in South India. Some people worship the goddess in Saumya form with Vaidika method, which is vegetarian offerings and all that. And some people worship the goddess in Ugra form in Tantric or Agamic methods with Bali and different and so on. And this is how our society is laid out. Importantly, South Indian society. So we have the Vedikachara and Vaidikachara and Dakshinachara on one side, which follows, respects the Vidhi Nishedas to Vaidikachara respects the Vidhi Nishedas to completely as per the Smritis, and the Dakshinachara has its own versions of Vidhi Nisheda, but it agrees with the Vidhi Nishedas of Smritis to a certain extent, but Vamachara completely rejects the Vidhi Nisheda. It has a different set of Vidhi Nisheda, and the so in order to understand, we have to go deep. So that is another topic. So from Vedic, those people who are in Vaidikachara and Dakshinachara have to follow a strict lifestyle that includes Yama, Niyama, Shaucha, etc. Vidhi Nisheda. So if those people who do not either fulfill the obligations of that Achara, or if they are Kula Kattubadu or Kattubadi or the Grama Kattubadi, something such kind of rules, and if they commit such an offense which doesn't have Prayaschitta in the Smritis, or if these people are afraid to perform those Prayaschitas, they used to get excommunicated, and those people who were excommunicated ended up in the Vamachara groups. And as I said, this Vamachara does not respect the Vidhi Nisheda of the Smriti point of view, or so therefore they have their own set of ideas, and so in the society we have two extremes, two mutually opposite viewpoints, but the end destination is the same, but the paths are different, which are even currently today we have those sects, but they forgot a lot about themselves. So in general, this is the layout. Those people who end up in Vamachara, they were given more leniency on habits, And once the purpose of the Vamachara is to again to let go the love and bhoga, so the individual turns towards vairagya, and therefore he travels his journey towards the Shruti paths. So such people again, those who such people who I'm not getting the right word. Such people who were enlightened were also treated as great purushas and siddhas and so on. Now we'll move on to the concept called kulam. So in South Indian society, we have importantly in Telugu society, we have kulas. We hardly come across the word jati, but kula is widely being used. There are so many definitions to kula, but in day-to-day use, kula is used in the context of family, lineage, and so on. But there are other meanings to kula also. For example, Monier Williams in his dictionary gives many meanings, but one of the meaning he says is with Shaktas of Shakti and of the rites observed in her worship. So it is related to Shakti Puja. So in a text called Mahanirvana Tantra, in one of the footnotes, it is defined, Kula is defined as Sajatiya Samuha consisting in the equality of Jnata, Jnana and Jnaya, which is the object of knowledge is called Jnayam, the knower is called Jnata, and the process by which one can understand is called Jnana, which is the knowledge. So that's how it is defined. So there is another definition we can come across in a text called Chidgagana Chandrika of Kalidasa, which says Sajatiya Nam Matrumanameya Nam Samuha Kulam. So what it essentially is saying is that it is a group of people who are in the common religious pursuit, who are in the Jnata, Jnana, and Gaya, and all these things in common to this group. So P.C. Bakshi, a Tantric scholar who wrote a book in 1938, he quoted this Chidgagana Chandrika, and he said, quote, though in a very large number of Brahminical tantras, the word kula, kulachara, kula shastra, etc. occur, the real significance of kula is rarely defined. The mystic practices of the school are elaborately described, and it often seems that the word kula was taken by them as an equivalent of Shakti. So the Tantric texts use this word in the concept called, they use this kulam with the meaning Shakti as the meaning. So we can see a similar sloka in Kularnava Tantra, which says Akulam Shiva Ityuktam Kulam Shakti Prakirtita. So which is saying that the Kularnava Tantra is saying that Shiva is Akula, Shakti is Kulam. So which means Shiva Shakti is Kulam. So that is the title of my latest book in English. Sivasya Kulam means Shiva Shakti. So Abhinava Gupta also confirms that Kula means Shakti. He gave various meanings also, but importantly Tantrics when the Tantric ideology used this term Kulam in the context of Shakti. Now let's understand a bit about Jati. The term Jati has many dimensions. Some say that Jati was used to identify territorial, worship, occupational groups. But in spiritual sphere, it either denotes Varna or Kula. In order to understand Shudra Varna Jati's spiritual functionality, it is important to understand various Agamika Tantrika rules. So here, as I said earlier, Jati has two important meanings. One is birth, and the other is having certain things in common. So many traditions propagated, if we are talking about the birth-based, Jati, then there are many traditions that propagated non-birth-based theories. For example, Agamic Tantric ideology at times asks the sadhaka to renounce his Jati. Many Tantric sects did not accept the caste system. But, West did not even consider those Tantric texts. And again, using the reductionistic approach, conveniently and completely remove these texts from the equation. Because society had, several institutions such as Sampradaya, Varna, Kula, Jati, Desha, and so on. The Europeans had tried to force fit this complex matrix into of complex matrix of institutions into a single grouping called caste. Another important aspect is Buddhism also honored Jatis. Their mythology have reference to Bodhisattva coming from Varnashma background. They believed in high birth and low birth and so on. Thus, it becomes very important to understand the Buddhist influence on Jati system also. There is an argument of untouchability, but there are many instances of counter-untouchability. Dr. Ambedkar himself said that the so-called untouchable caste did not admit Brahmins to their street. In the past, death was punishment to a Brahmin for such an attempt. In 1871, during Bengal famines, a few Jatis did not want to receive food from Brahmin cooks at the emergency kitchen. Instead, they chose to starve and die. So 1871, 1881, 1891 Madras censuses briefly talk about this, reverse untouchability or mutual untouchability. There are many, we can come across such scenarios, in many places. Again, colonials conveniently ignored these to create their oppression theories. And again, using the incomplete information and its based reductionistic approach, conveniently labeled one side of this as untouchability. There were various kinds of sexual intermixture that took place for a long time. For example, various books talk about various types of Varna intermixture. Given this scenario, it becomes very difficult to draw race theories on such intermixture. Unless one ignores these racial intermixtures, then only one can selectively draw race theories. Colonists use this selective approach in different regions and groups. And they also applied this to different types of practices, and they there were also a wide range of practices, across India, but they applied the same philosophy to this. For example, if we are talking about these practices, there is in Kerala there is a Sambandham system, and there is a widespread practices of Anuloma marriages, polyandry, polygamy, Vamachara, rituals, and so on. There were several Jatis who practice hypergamy, which is, in a way, it is similar to Anuloma sexual relations. For example, Jats and Rajputs, Rajputs and Bills, Rajputs and Kolis, and few Brahmins in Gujarat area, and so on. The 1901 Census Commissioner Risley, who propagated the race theory, himself said that the custom of, quote, the custom of hypergamy to be of a great antiquity and to prevail in India over a wide area at the present day. So he's saying that he saw this practice being, he saw this hypergamy, which is Anuloma relations, were being practiced, in wide area in India. So which means there was a racial intermixture to a certain extent. We even heard of North Indians marrying Kerala women due to shortages. K.S. Lal in his book talks about Kshatriya women marrying other Jatis, such as, presently they are classified as low caste. And he also says, he also explains how, the Charmakara Chamars Jati became Kshatriyas. Similarly, in South India, many Jati became Kshatriyas. Some inscriptions say that in 14th century, people from hunter Jati, became Brahmanas. In 19th century, missionaries recorded a ritual in which a Shudra became a Kshatriya in South India. And there are a few Puranas that also contain, few rituals that, that provide the change of Varna. History is full of such instances. In many instances, British enacted marriage laws that kill the various types of sexual intermixture. With all this in mind, we cannot reduce these many diverse systems and practices to a single universal endogamous race or caste theory. But the Western colonial reductionistic approach made it possible again here. So with this, I'm going to the contrast of the worldviews. So in the dharmic perspective, from the spiritual point of view, the societal divisions are based on spirituality and sadhana and upasana. In the Western perspective, societal divisions are based on material aspects, class, money, power, race, etc. So in dharmics, in the dharmic perspective, each Varna Kula has its own method of anushtana, sadhana, leading towards moksha and satya. In the West, it only uses one size fits all model to everyone. So believes in many sadhana paths, dharmic viewpoint believes in many sadhana paths, many gods and goddesses, and many books, which means that the dharmic concept believes that there are men are different type, so each one is different. So everybody should have a tailor fit made of sadhana that suits his needs. This is the approach. So if we have to if we have to fit the dharmic concepts into the Western framework, then we should say that dharmics have multiple or a lot of religions. Perhaps we could say each kula is a religion. That's how it is, because they have a tailor-made sadhana and their own devatas, devi devatas, and so on. But the Western perspective believes in one God, one book, and one path, on one religion. So each kula, jati have their own choice of sadhana and God. But in the Christian world or the Western world, there is no such policy of Ishta Devata, Kula Devata, only one God. Thus, as per Western definition of Hindu Dharma, this contains many religions. So according to Western definition of Abrahamic paths are individual religions. Those who are not fulfilling the obligations of sadhana are excommunicated in dharmic society. But there is nothing such, there was no such concept as of excommunication. But all aspects of all societal functions were built on the model of hierarchy. But as we learned earlier, the people were kept away based on the racial and racial segregation was not allowed. So it is purely again materialistic separation. The dharmic perspective respects the nature and lives in sync with the nature. But the Western perspective, its development model is built on the nature destruction with doctrine of discovery and so on. Now, the conclusion is that using the reductionistic approach, colonists selectively choose Hindu concepts and overlap them with the Abrahamic concepts. Thus, caste was constructed. The present hue and cry in the West about Hindu caste is a bigger attempt to continue the colonization of Hinduism by caste. Due to long oppression and destruction of the education system, the Indian society internalized these colonial terms and meanings, forgetting the true essence. Presently, using caste theories, the non-white populations are made to believe the same colonial lies which justified the colonization of Hinduism. As we can see from these details, Sanatana Dharma had a very detailed system of Varna, Kula, Jati, which led the individual towards Purusharthas. The system was heavily misappropriated by the colonials to weaken the roots of Sanatana Dharma. It is important for us to understand the distortions so that we can be proud of our Sanatana Dharma and defeat such mischievous attempts. But I was supposed to mention a couple of points in the Jati, this thing. So, when we are talking about the economic prospects, there were so many rights were given, and there were many of our jatis, the so-called oppressed category people, they used to work in the armies, and they were given ancient rights. Inscriptions are available. Dr. Ambedkar himself quoted 52 rights given to Mahars. And there were evidence that leather was exported from Cholamandalam from 1644. And there is a lot of records in British reports available about the worth of leather that was exported to Europe or America at that time. But it was these colonial regimes who imposed the birth-based 1871 Criminal Tribes Act on these depressed category jatis. But today, using them, they are, as a reason, they are trying to attack, as their situation. They're trying to, criticize the dharmic society. There is another important point that we should know is that the West is doing extensive research on Tantrism, and these tantric ideas are seem to be getting appropriated these tantric ideas and texts importantly belong to the so-called low caste groups. So the Westerners, in a way, are equating Jati with caste and adding oppression narratives. So one question everyone must ask is this: isn't the rulers are responsible to provide economic opportunities and facilities to his or her subjects? We all know what the rulers did during the colonial rule. Of course, the ruler was busy robbing his Hindu subjects and ultimately put the blame on the Hindu society and spirituality. So with this, I conclude. If Hindu sadhana paths and spiritual divisions are to be termed caste, then on the same lines, the Abrahamic faiths and their divisions also can be called caste. So we have to, as I mentioned in the last point, the dharmic ideas or dharmic systems are misinterpreted, misappropriated. So therefore, it is important for every one of us to understand its their true dimensions, so that we can we can be proud of our dharma, and will do our sadhana as per the various ideas given by our rishis and maharishis.
Very fast, very informative, packed with facts presentation. I think it was a fascinating listen, and the forum is open for questions. If people can raise their hand in Zoom and to ask themselves, or you can always type in chat. So we have Chinmay Nagarkar. Chinmayji, please go ahead.
Hi, namaste, everybody. Thank you for the discussion and or the talk. There's a lot to unpack over here, but I have a couple of questions. Maybe I can do one, and then maybe if nobody else has any, I can ask a second or third. But my first question is like this: what is the point here? Is it a about a colonial narrative, or is it a real introspection, right? And is it about understanding what to do next, or is it about revising history? So I'm trying to, or understanding history. Like, what is the point of this? Because to me, it really doesn't matter who said what 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago. We know what Varna means because we know from the Bhagavad Gita, which pretty much most people accept. And I feel like it's a mistake to take the smritis, like the Manusmriti, for example, and use them or assume that they are reasonable things that we should pay attention to and accept or be proud of or something like that. All temporal things, all things that are limited to space and time, and associate them with dharma and then try to defend it. It seems like a very odd thing to do. Instead, perhaps we should reduce the problem to something like equality of opportunity and focus on that and say, look, these are all temporal ideas. They had their time. They might have been better or worse than the other existing ideas in the West, but right now, it has no relevance and not equated to something as big as Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma is really very foundational and eternal and non-temporal. And I feel like we shouldn't equate the two things. But I mean, that's just my opening remarks. I've done a lot of work on this, and I'm very
Chinmayji, do you have a question? Please, just stay with your question. Thank you.
Yeah, the question is, shouldn't we talk about that instead of talking about sort of creating this narrative about how our history is different than, because at the end of the day,
Sorry, Chinmayji. Sorry, Chinmayji. I should interrupt you. So the question, Mohanji, is, what is the point of all this? Are we trying to address some issues here, or what is the purpose of your study? That's probably the question Chinmayji has.
The purpose of the study is this: that we should understand, we should have our own view about our past, not about the outsider telling us what is outsider defining us about our ideas and concepts. So once we understand our own systems, then we know how to channel our energies and where to channel our energies and to suit the needs of the society. So if we don't introspect and if we don't go back and refer to our texts and understand them, so there is a discontinuity between the past and present and to the future also. So if such kind of and any reforms that don't consider the past and don't connect the past, present, and the future will also won't last long, and they will also lead the society into a turn the society into non-harmonious way. So it becomes imperative for us to really understand ourselves first.
Okay, so one question in the chat from Vijay Raghavanji is he's asking, in the present day, is it possible to have mobility between castes as you have presented with different various references in earlier texts?
It is happening, whether we agree it or not. There are a lot of intercaste marriages happening as we speak. So it did happen in the past. So it is not the only time. So there are so many jatis that got intermixed, and so many new jatis created, or so many in many ways in Anuloma marriages. They stayed with father's jati or they stayed with mother's jati. So there are many examples in the history. So it's happening.
Okay, Ranganji, please go ahead.
Yes, Adiyen Jai Sriman Narayana, Vanakkam, Srimate Ramanujan. My question here is, I think we are facing multiple onslaughts of other people's interpretation. So it's good to have our own view on these. But what are we going to, this is also my question, reform our society so that anyone can become, a priesthood if they have those qualities and be active in the temples and community and take their place, whether it's gender or whether it's, language or whether it's region. I think we need to cross section, because we've been divided so much into segments that we are talking only within our own segments. We are not talking about the wider Hindu community, Hindu society, and our fabric is endangered at this global world. So I think we need to reach out and redefine and put a new norm with the Vedic system in place, that this is what we want to believe and this is what we are going to do. And how can we do this, please? Thank you. Adiyen. Jai Sriman Narayana.
Okay, so now we're talking about temples and priests. So each Agama Sampradaya has had their own temples and their own priests. So it is not that Brahmins were priests for all Sampradayas. So let's say, for example, if we go to Gramadevata temples, it was many of these so-called SC Jati people who are the priests even today in many of the temples. It was because these agamic culture was heavily attacked and destroyed during the colonialism. Now everybody is turning towards Brahmins because they forgot themselves. But given this, there are also, each sadhana is different, as I said, it is. So now shall we, if our rishis come up with new concepts of sadhana that allow each one of us, anybody can become anything, perhaps that's what maybe we should work on, our rishis, or maybe there should be a new rishi in the future who comes up with a new concept. So until then, these things we will be keep discussing, and it is the responsibility of the gurus, or not the responsibility. The way the gurus at certain points they will come in and they will guide the society in that direction. But having said that, as I mentioned earlier, where there are various temples in Bharata, and they all have different sadhanas and acharas. And based on the achara and this path, where there are various jati people who are the priests in the past, and there were women also in certain temples, or they worked as pujaris. So therefore, the having the argument of women not becoming pujaris, temple priestess, is, I think, in my opinion, is a weak thing, unless you want to impose it like the Christian. You want to take the Western approach and impose it on everybody.
Thank you. Raghavanji, please go ahead.
Namaste. Excellent presentation. I learned so much, but there is no end to learning. I want to specifically ask the question that because I'm interested in working with schools, all the school textbooks have this pyramid. They teach it in high schools on the course on religion. There's the pyramid with Brahmins and Kshatriyas and Shudras at the bottom, and below that there's a section called Untouchables. Can you please educate us how that went, what is the history of that one? And in general, I believe that, the Hindus themselves are so deeply colonized that we are so quick to jump and get this Western message that's been given to us that we are casteist, but we don't really know what it was. And, we're very quick to be on that side and take the blame and shame, but we haven't taken the time to learn about what it was. So this type of presentation is really helpful because, the Sanatana Dharma is so diverse. We need to understand it more. So I really appreciate the presentation, and it renews my commitment to learn more about the Jati and Varna system. Thank you. And where can we buy this book, by the way?
I will share the link
Thank you.
of the book, Ji. So now we're talking about the fifth group that the British called Panchamas, and as I said earlier, we didn't have any official high, low, untouchable, or the Panchama divisions. These are the colonial classifications. As I said, every caste had their own version of hierarchy. So they had their own way of, imagination, or their own version of who's great, who's not great. But it was the British who set in stone. From the Hindu point of view, the Shudra Varna was divided into two groups, which was Sat Sudras and Asat Sudras. So certain books say that the so-called the untouchable Jatis were belong to Asat Sudras. In Agamas also we have two divisions, Sat Agamas and Asat Agamas. So if we look at the acharas of certain jatis in the so-called untouchable divisions, we have the colonial reports themselves indicate that certain jatis used to practice certain Vamacharik rituals and so on. The live example we have is the Gramadevata rituals and all that, in which there is Bali happens and all that, and and there are so many things around it. Around the Grama Devatas, such as the Bhuta Vaidyam and so many things, which the colonists started calling them as a Dravidian religion, but if we go deep, these things are essentially connected to Indian medical systems and the Tantrism also. There are links with both these what we call the concepts. So in order for us to understand really who these people are, we really have to match their achara with the Asat Sudra category texts, and then for sure we will have a lot of information on this. I quoted a few pieces of information in my book also. You can find them there.
Please go ahead.
Okay.
I'll
Sure.
share the details, please.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Prasadji. Thank you, Sudha Mohanji, for a wonderful presentation. I would just like you to request you to how you one of the points which we discussed, or when we were forming this talk, was the effect of this reductionist approach, and how it has now turned into conversions, and how that is impacting the Hindu society. Could you please talk something more about that?
Yeah, see, first, in order for us to really stop colonization, we have to actually look at our which groups are getting colonized or are getting converted. So because there is a lot of many of these groups, there is a lot of identity crisis because of the post-colonial world. There is a lot of the Dravidian theory has caused a lot of confusion, and this subsequent high-low classification and Panchama and all that. And these people, they're also lost their touch with their acharas and their spirituality. Many of them, they don't even know which for the Shaivite sects, they don't even know that they are Shaivites. So and some of them are Vaishnavites too, and they don't even know that they're Vaishnavite. So they're the lost. It is important to bring their awareness and to explore their roots. and therefore thus we establish their identity of mainly the spiritual identity. And also if they really want or to rebuild their religious institutions, such as in many instances, the several missionaries at the early 20th century wrote many books about the Grama Devatas, explaining them to be Dravidian religions or gods and goddesses. And they also expressed views of destroying these Grama Devata temples. Then only these so-called Janapadas can build their churches on top of the remnants of the Grama Devata temples. So having them researched about Grama Devatas, and there are a few texts such as Vaidikagama Sutra, Parashara Vaidikagama Sutra, which talk about the Grama Devata Pratishtha and all that. So we know that Grama Devata has agamic connections. So all we have to do is go to their actually spiritual paths, their acharas, explore their acharas, understand them, and we got to bring them. We got to some spiritual leaders should should take this charge and try to remove the ajnana from their in these spheres. So and give the right information, and let them choose which sadhana path they want to go, because they have a lot of sadhana paths like Veerashaiva. There is a Shaiva Siddhanta. They have Nada Sampradaya. So there are so many paths, agamic paths that are open. So they can take them readily. But in order for them to do, in order for us to, or even Pancharatra, tradition, there are so many of them. So they all can take these people, So we really have to invest more time on the acharas of these jatis, and we should work on removing the ideological confusion in that sphere.
Pankaj, please go ahead.
Hello, thanks for the presentation. It was wonderful. I live in a village in North India, and recently there was a problem here regarding a marriage between a Shudra and a Brahmin. So the point you mentioned before that a person can become a Brahmin by marrying, a Brahmin. But besides, is there any other way in which a Shudra can become a Brahmin, like by practicing some sort of spiritual path, or, because we don't have spiritual leaders in our area who have such in-depth knowledge as you do, and people get swayed away by emotion and widespread lack of knowledge, and just, they follow whatever goes, and it leads to a lot of disturbances in the society. So could you clear if a person can become a Brahmin by practice, not just by birth or marriage?
Okay, so let me clear this. I'm not an authority to comment on Vedas and Agamas. I'm not a spiritual guru, as you said, and it is, I totally respect our Vedika gurus and their capability and their knowledge. And it is them who has to guide the society, and I will follow their leads. But the question that you are asking, what is your objective? Do you want to be a Brahmana, or do you want moksha, or do you want spiritual enlightenment? This is the confusion that people has to ask. This is the question they have to ask themselves. Do you really want to be a Brahmin? So if you really want to be a Brahmin, then many people, people have to start practicing Indriya Nigraha. That means they should, they should practice all the vegetarianism, and they should not drink alcohol and all that. And it is this you should really start, doing in life. And once you, the society will understand your obligations once you are actually, that's how it used to be before. But as I said, all the agamic paths or tantric paths have their own version of sadhanas, depending. They're based on different sets of ideas. So here we have to ask, the line is, do you want, what is our objective? Is it to understand the ultimate reality, or to be a Brahmana? So these are two completely different questions. So therefore, once we have the clarity in these lines, then perhaps we can progress. And so, just so you know, as I said earlier, there are certain rituals, in different Puranas are there. A few texts say that it did happen in the past, but then we have to go actually explore the other dimensions of this information.
Rabindranath ji, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. It was very nice, very highly academic. Thanks for all of you for organizing this. I have a comment. Way back, I was listening to Swami Chinmayananda in his lectures on Bhagavad Gita. What I remember to have heard from him is the so-called Varnas, and these are all depend on he used a word called vasanas, previous janmas, good or bad karmas, and we come to this world with those impressions or vasanas. So depending on that, we mature or grow in this world. According to Swami Chinmayananda, what I remember is, it's not by birth you become a Brahmin or a Jew, or a Sudra or whatever. You could be born in a Sudra. For example, I was born in a backward community, but I believe I learned some good things from my friends and my parents and my society. I am above, I don't drink, I don't eat non-vegetarian, la, 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 la. So point is, you could be, this is most misunderstood division. This is all depending upon, a Sudra could be a king, a Brahmin could be a thief. So we gave these names. Essentially, the bottom line before I hang up is, it depends upon your previous vasanas or impressions in your mind, or also depends upon your growth, your society, where you are growing up. These are the ones that decide the so-called division of Sudra, Brahmana, or Kshatriya, or Vaishya. So you could be a Vaishya and be temperamentally, you could be a king, you could be a leader. You could be born in a Brahmin society or Kshatriya society, and you could be a Vaishya. You could be doing business or cheating people. I don't mean cheat, doing business. So that's about it. So this classification is purely dependent on vasanas and your get up and growth in this society. Thank you.
Thank you, Raviraj. Excellent. Varunji, please go ahead.
It was a nice presentation. Again, when we see these words, Kula, Jati, and Varna, these are all words which have been derived from Vedas. So when we try to understand these, we have to make sure that we understand the Vedangas, which have been, secured from those are the Vedangas which have secured the Vedas. Now let's understand how these words have been derived. Varna is not something, it's come from the word called dhatu, called bring varne. That means to choose. So who chooses? Every person had to go to Gurukula during the previous times. So he goes to a Gurukula, he makes the study there. Then the Guru, based on their guna, karma, and swabhava, he understands them and say that, okay, now your guna, karma, swabhava, which is most predominant, is as a Brahmana. That means to say, who gains knowledge and who also gives knowledge to others. Kshatriya is a person, kshatat trayata, who saves the society from the blows from outsiders, not just the blows from outsiders. Anything which happens to the society inside, he makes sure that they save them. Vaishya is a person who finds where there is scarcity and where there is abundance. He makes sure that there is a bridge between that, and he makes sure he takes of that. Shudra is a person who also requires knowledge. All the four have gone to a Gurukula, all the four have got the knowledge, all the four require knowledge too, and all the four also wear the Yagnopavitam. Everyone is allowed to wear Yagnopavitam as per the Vedic study there. So Shudra is a person who removes the laziness. He works for the society, he works for the infrastructure there. So now this Varna is not from birth. It is from after Gurukula, they do a samskara called as Samavartana Samskara. Please make sure it's called Samavartana Samskara. It's like nothing but a convocation. During that time, the Guru gives him saying, this is your predominant quality. Now you work in this field as a Brahmana. You give your contribution to the society in this field. Okay, let's come back to what is Jati and what is Kula.
Sorry, Varunji.
Varunji.
Varunji, sorry to disturb, because you have a question or?
No, I'm just trying to tell
No, that's
Sir was
okay.
telling
So
there
we,
are
you
plenty
know,
of
this is,
jatis there, but
no,
these
it's,
jatis have not been mentioned in Vedas. When so we need to make sure that we go to Vedangas and Vedic study instead of referring to
So
other
that is
texts
there.
because they
That
have
is
come from the same.
here. Sorry, Jay, I forgot your name. I understand. You know, there is a Karpatri Swami Maharaji and all these you know, great people. They wrote books on this topic. So perhaps I'll draw your attention to those books. Maybe you should read them. Perhaps many of your questions will be answered there. He's an excellent scholar, and you know, it's a very extensive book. It's written in Sanskrit, perhaps because you sound to be, you know, a person who knows Sanskrit. So please read it. Therefore, many of your, you know, these confusions, he might give you answers there.
thank you. Meghaji, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So it was a nice session. My question is just that what I came to from my all of this knowledge, that earlier when Kshatriya, whoever the guru used to teach the Dhanush Bana to Kshatriya, but to those Kshatriya only to become a Brahmin. I mean, Dhanush Ban is, it was there to one statement. I mean, how could I say, I shall say in Hindi, that Dhanush Ban was only जिनको सिखाया जाता था, जो, I mean, Brahmin होने के लायक है. ऐसे मैंने सुना है. तो is it right? I mean, what is your in context? Is somebody, I mean, somewhere if you heard.
It's really hard, Ji, because, you know, many people read Mahabharata and Purana Itihasa and apply the information to the present society. But what we have to understand is that, you know, how the Hindu society was in 19th century, and then compare it with the Puranas and Itihasas or Smritis or whatever, because there were a lot of changes, you know, as time evolved. There were many adjustments made here and there, and a lot of things happened. So if we are trying to apply the Vedic idea to the present day, like as it is, you know, in some places we may have very difficulty, you know, fitting that, you know, the idea, because as time evolved, there are so many adjustments to these ideas. The agamas are one example, tantras are another example. So there were new ideas came as time evolved. So we really have to understand these texts. Without understanding the agama and tantra, I think we're only looking at the puzzle, you know, half of the puzzle. The other half is still obscured in the dark. So, you know, we really have to see this, because there are many, there used to be 64 kalas, and, you know, some texts talk about, you know, 64 arts, you know, these are the so-called, you know, Kula Sadhana in many ways, like Dashamahavidya and all that. They're all interlinked, you know, there are interlinks. There are other texts also that talk about 64 kalas. You know, and in a Vyavaharika level, there are more than 500 kalas, but most texts talk about 64 kalas, and some scholars say that there is a linkage between the 64 kalas and the 64 tantras. So somehow there is a linkage between the tantras, kalas, and all that. And they used to be, you know, people used to be taught with, you know, Indrajala and Mayavada Vidya, Mantravada Vidya, and different kinds of arts. So we really have to understand tantras, agamas to really get a good picture about our society. Without that, you know, if I tell you whatever it is, it may not be a complete information.
And thank you for the presentation. Your underlying message was the spirituality which drove the different varnas or jatis, etc., and the grama devatas and so on. So wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for presenting, and hope to see you again. And thank you all in the audience and people who asked the questions. Thank you for your contribution. We'll meet again. Thank you.
Dhanyavad Prasadji. Namaste to all.